So picture this. It's the early 1960s, right?
Okay.
And there's this medical researcher, and he's just working in his lab. He's handling this completely clear, completely odorless liquid.
Right.
He's not drinking it. He's not, like, inhaling it. He's just working with it. And accidentally, he spills just a few drops directly onto his bare skin.
Happens all the time in labs, yeah.
Exactly. So he just wipes it off, probably doesn't think much of it. But then, a few minutes later, something incredibly bizarre happens.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Yeah. He starts to taste oysters in his mouth. Like a distinct, unmistakable flavor of raw oysters.
It's just so weird.
And right after that, a massive, just overwhelming aftertaste of garlic hits him. And get this, he hasn't eaten anything all day.
Wow.
All right, so the question is, how did a clear, odorless liquid that literally just touched his skin somehow end up, registering on his taste buds just minutes later?
Well, I mean, that moment is basically the definition of a biological mystery.
Yeah.
Because you have a barrier, the human skin, which is, well, it's designed by millions of years of evolution to keep the outside world outside and the inside world inside.
It's nature's security system.
Exactly. It is a highly sophisticated, multi-layered defense mechanism. And yet this substance completely ignored that barrier.
It just bypassed it.
Yeah, it didn't just breach the wall, it strolled right through, entered the bloodstream, and traveled to the sensory receptors in the mouth so fast that it practically rewrote the rules of human physiology.
That is wild, and that exact wild territory is where today's deep dive is venturing. We are looking at a natural substance called DMSO, or dimethyl sulfoxide.
That's right.
We've pulled together this incredibly detailed stack of clinical guides. We're talking diseases, dosages, application methods, alongside historical texts that document the rise, the fall, and the really highly polarized underground resurgence of this compound.
Yeah, and the goal for us today is to really decode this substance, which is often referred to in the medical literature as a biological Trojan horse.
I love that phrase.
It's so accurate, though. We are going to explore its strange chemical properties, break down the, frankly, incredibly strict, unforgiving rules for using it safely.
Which are intense, by the way.
Super intense. And we're also going to examine the historical claims about why a compound with over, 11,000 published research papers was effectively sidelined by mainstream medicine.
Yeah, we've got a lot of ground to cover. And whether you are dealing with a stubborn sports injury, or maybe you're just curious about the frontiers of alternative therapies, or, you're just fascinated by weird chemistry, this deep dive is going to fundamentally change how you think about the permeability of your own body.
It really does. It forces a complete reevaluation of the architecture of the human cell.
Because what we're talking about today challenges the very idea of what can and cannot enter your system, right?
Absolutely. When you understand what happened to that researcher in the 60s, you realize that under the right chemical conditions, your body is radically porous.
Okay, so let's start with the substance itself, dimethyl sulfoxide. The chemical formula is C2H6OS.
Right.
It is a natural organic sulfur compound. But the origin story is, honestly, almost as weird as the oyster tasting anecdote.
It really is.
Because to find the source of this highly potent tissue-penetrating liquid, you actually have to start in the middle of the ocean.
Which is fascinating. The global, elemental scale of its origins is just incredible.
Yeah.
Because DMSO is intrinsically linked to the ocean's ecosystem.
Yeah.
You have these microscopic phytoplankton in the sea.
Like the base of the food chain stuff.
Exactly. And they absorb sulfur compounds, which are largely produced by underwater volcanic activity and geological weathering.
Okay.
So through their natural metabolic cycle, these plankton produce an organic sulfide called DMS, or dimethyl sulfide. And this has happened constantly all over the world in every single ocean.
So we've basically been ingesting it via the food chain for millennia without even knowing it.
Literally, yeah.
But the DMSO that people use for therapeutic purposes isn't harvested by, scooping up ocean water and filtering out microscopic plankton, right?
No, that would be incredibly inefficient.
Right. The commercial and medical supply actually comes from trees. Specifically, it's extracted from wood lignin.
Right, and lignin is this complex organic polymer that makes plants rigid and woody. It's essentially the structural support of a tree, the glue that holds the cellulose fibers together.
Okay.
And historically, the extraction of DMSO happened almost entirely as a byproduct of paper manufacturing.
Wait, paper manufacturing? Like making printer paper?
Exactly. When you pulp wood to make paper using the craft process or the sulfite process, you have to separate the soft cellulose fibers from that rigid lignin.
Got it.
In that massive industrial chemical process, a vast amount of sulfur-rich liquid is produced basically as waste.
Yeah, as waste.
Yeah, that waste stream is where DMSO is born.
That is just bonkers to me. It's like the secret code hidden in plain sight. We have a substance that is a fundamental part of the global marine ecosystem quietly entering our food chain, and then we just accidentally figured out how to mass produce it while we were trying to make cardboard boxes.
It's rich irony, really. A profound medical discovery essentially scraped out of an industrial waste pipe.
Okay, but to understand why a paper mill byproduct can just instantly penetrate human skin, we need to look at its physical properties, and the sources say those properties are incredibly temperamental.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a colorless liquid, but its relationship with temperature is completely counterintuitive for a normal solvent.
It really is. Like, get this, it crystallizes and becomes a solid below 18 to 20 degrees Celsius.
Which is crazy hot.
Right. For those of us using Fahrenheit, that's roughly 64 to 68 degrees. So if your house is just a little bit chilly, your bottle of liquid DMSO literally turns into a chunk of ice on your counter.
Yeah, and from a chemical standpoint, that high freezing point is really unusual. I mean, water freezes at 0 Celsius, ethanol freezes at minus 114 Celsius.
Wow.
So the fact that DMSO freezes essentially at room temperature tells us something profound about the way its molecules interact with one another.
What do you mean?
Well, they love to tightly align and form a crystalline lattice the very moment the temperature drops even slightly. They're highly structured.
Okay, but then on the other end of the spectrum, it boils at 189 degrees Celsius,
Right.
which is nearly double the boiling point of water. But you have to be careful because it reaches a flash point at just 88 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, that's where it gets dangerous.
The sources say at that temperature, it can release explosive gas mixtures. So it freezes on a cool autumn day, but if you heat it up too much, it becomes an explosion hazard. How did chemists even figure out how to isolate and stabilize this stuff safely?
Well, to isolate it effectively, chemists rely on advanced oxidation processes.
Okay, what's that?
Without getting too deep into the weeds here, oxidation is essentially a way of changing how electrons are shared within a molecule.
Right.
So by putting the base sulfur compounds through specific oxidation states, they can isolate a compound with a highly unique geometric structure.
Like the physical shape of the molecule.
Yes. DMSO has a central sulfur atom attached to an oxygen atom, and it's flanked by 2 methyl groups. But the real secret to its power lies in the sulfur atom's lone pair of electrons.
A lone pair, meaning electrons that aren't bonding with anything else.
Precisely. That lone pair of electrons just sits on the sulfur atom, while the highly electronegative oxygen atom pulls electron density toward itself.
Oh, so it creates like an imbalance.
Exactly. This specific shape makes the molecule highly polar. It has a massive magnetic-like pull. It acts as what we call a nephrotic solvent.
A product meaning what, exactly?
It means it doesn't donate hydrogen atoms, but it eagerly accepts them. So this extreme polarity is what allows it to interact with both water and fats in a way that almost no other substance on Earth can.
That is fascinating. But before we dive into what that polarity does inside the human body, we really have to talk about the history of this stuff because it reads like a medical thriller.
It really does.
The literature notes that DMSO was actually first synthesized way back in 1866 by a Russian scientist, Alexander Zaitsev, sometimes referenced in the text as Dr. Mikhailovich.
Right.
But it just sat on a shelf, chemically speaking, for nearly a century.
Yeah, it was a classic case of a molecule without an application. They knew what it was, but not what to do with it.
Right.
And it wasn't until the early 1960s that its biological potential was really realized. This was spearheaded by Dr. Robert Herschler and Dr. Stanley Jacob at the Oregon Health and Science University.
Wait, Dr. Jacob, that's the researcher from our opening story.
The very same. The one who spilled it on his skin and tasted the ocean.
So that accidental spill was the actual catalyst.
It was. It made him realize, well, if this strange wood pulp byproduct can travel from this skin to the taste buds in just minutes, what else can it do? What can it carry with it?
Oh, wow.
And that realization just led to an absolute explosion of research. The clinical momentum was staggering. I mean, within just a few years, there were thousands of articles, clinical trials, and reports written by researchers confirming the profound biological effects of DMSO.
Like what kind of effects?
They were testing it for severe burns, intractable pain, arthritis, and even organ preservation for transplants.
That sounds incredibly promising.
It was. But then, right at the height of its promise, the brakes were slammed hard. DMSO was effectively banned for widespread medical use in America in 1965 by the FDA.
Wow, 1965. That ban is actually the focal point of a massive historical controversy in the sources we're looking at.
Oh, definitely.
Because if there was so much promising data, why the sudden restriction? Right. The historical texts we are examining present a highly critical narrative of this event.
Very critical.
They assert that the ban was driven by what they term expired propaganda and aggressive lobbying by the pharmaceutical industry. Now, we want to be clear to you listening. We aren't taking sides here. We are just reporting impartially on the claims made in these sources.
Right. It's important to understand the narrative the authors are building. And the core of their argument basically comes down to economics.
As it often does.
Because DMSO is a naturally occurring compound and a byproduct of the massive timber industry, it is incredibly cheap to produce.
Right.
But more importantly, it is completely unpatentable.
Because you can't patent a natural molecule that comes out of a pine tree.
Exactly. So the historical claim in these books is that the pharmaceutical lobbies viewed DMSO as a massive threat to their bottom line.
I mean, if a cheap, unpatentable, readily available solvent could effectively treat severe chronic pain or localized inflammation,
it would instantly undercut the market for expensive, patented anti-inflammatory drugs and targeted painkillers.
Yeah, that makes sense from business perspective.
So the narrative presented is that they engineered a campaign to restrict its use. The authors claim they demanded an impossible standard of safety data that simply couldn't be funded.
Because no pharmaceutical company would ever secure a patent to recoup those massive clinical trial costs.
Precisely. It's the classic David versus Goliath narrative. A cheap, highly effective natural remedy allegedly crushed by the financial interests of corporate medicine.
Right. And again, we were just tracking the history as it's laid out in the texts, but it is a compelling explanation for why something so heavily researched suddenly just vanished from mainstream clinics.
It's a sobering look at how medical innovation is sometimes dictated by patent law rather than clinical efficacy, at least according to these sources.
Okay, so we have this incredibly polarizing history. We have an industrial byproduct that freezes at room temperature, and we have the mystery of the oyster taste.
Right.
Let's get into the actual biology, because this is where it gets crazy. What exactly happened in Dr. Jacobs' body to make him taste garlic without eating any? How is this liquid actually moving through tissue?
Okay, to understand the movement, we really have to talk about cellular architecture and the concept of solvents.
Okay, break that down for me.
So water is a solvent, right? It dissolves water-soluble things like salt or sugar.
Right.
Alcohol and fats are solvents for lipid-soluble things. Now look at a human cell. The cells in your body are protected by a membrane that is essentially a lipid bilayer.
A lipid bilayer, so a complex double-layered wall of fat.
Exactly. That's nature's security system. It keeps water-soluble toxins out while allowing specific, necessary nutrients in through these highly regulated locking channels.
Okay.
Think of the lipid bilayer as a heavily guarded border crossing. If a water-soluble molecule tries to get through the fat layer, it just gets repelled.
Makes sense.
And if a fat-soluble molecule tries to get through the watery interior of the cell, it gets stuck. But DMSO is a bipolar solvent.
Right, because of that unique molecular shape and that extreme polarity we discussed earlier.
Yes, it is highly soluble in both water and fat.
Oh, so it doesn't need to wait in line at the border crossing. It doesn't need a specific receptor to open a gate.
Exactly. It dissolves right into the lipid membrane of the cell, just slipping right between the phospholipid heads without breaking them. And because it also loves water, the very moment it passes the fat layer, it moves seamlessly into the watery intracellular fluid.
It just bypasses the body's normal cellular barriers entirely.
Entirely. And it does so without causing structural damage to the tissue.
The literature uses some really evocative language to describe this. They call it a tractor substance, a vector, or a transmitter. I kind of like to think of it as the ultimate VIP cellular rideshare.
I like that. The rideshare analogy captures the transport aspect beautifully, but we actually need to add a layer of mechanical disruption to it to really get the full picture.
Okay, how so?
Well, the normal rideshare just drives on existing roads, right? DMSO actually alters the road.
Wait, what?
Yeah. As it moves, it temporarily changes the steric arrangement of the lipid bilayer. It literally wedges itself into the membrane, creating these temporary microchannels that increase the overall permeability of the tissue.
So it's a ride share that drives up to a brick wall, temporarily turns the bricks into sliding glass doors, drives through, and then the doors turn back into bricks behind it.
That is precisely the mechanism.
Mm.
And just consider what that means for delivering other drugs.
Right.
If you take a standard oral medication, let's say a heavy anti-inflammatory like cortisone, it has a grueling journey.
Yeah, it has to survive the acid of the stomach.
Right. Get metabolized by the liver, enter the systemic bloodstream, and then politely knock on the door of an inflamed cell, hoping the cell's receptors let it in.
And I imagine a huge percentage of the drug is just lost along the way.
Exactly. But if you dissolve that cortisone in DMSO first...
Oh, and the drug gets into the VIP rideshare.
Yes. The DMSO carries it directly through the epidermis, through the dermis, straight into the localized tissue. It creates those microchannels and drops the cortisone off directly inside the inflamed cell.
The efficiency of that is just staggering. And the clinical guides claim this has a profound dual effect, right? Because the transport isn't just a one-way street into the cell.
Not at all.
The sources say while DMSO is driving into the cell, pushing oxygen, nutrients, or specific medications deep into the tissue, it is simultaneously forcing the cell to flush out accumulated toxins.
Right.
Wait, so it's pushing things in and pulling things out at the exact same time? How does that even work chemically?
It basically comes down to osmotic pressure and oxidative stress. When a cell is inflamed or damaged, it builds up metabolic waste.
Like what?
Specifically free radicals and reactive oxygen species. These are highly destructive molecules that the cell really struggles to expel when it's under stress.
Okay.
So when DMSO wedges into the membrane and increases that permeability we talked about, it alters the osmotic gradient. Fluid rushes in, but fluid also rushes out.
Ah, I see.
The free radicals and accumulated toxins get caught in the outward flow. They are flushed into the extracellular space where the lymphatic system can finally clear them away.
It's like forcibly ventilating the cell. It opens the windows, lets the fresh air in, and just blows the smoke out.
That is an excellent way to visualize it. The cell is effectively allowed to clean and regenerate itself in a way it couldn't when the membrane was locked down by inflammation.
Okay, I have to pause here, though, because this raises a massive red flag for me.
Sure.
If DMSO is this universal key that just slides through the skin and opens up all these cellular windows,
Yeah.
what stops the bad stuff from getting a free ride in, too? Like, if I have some kind of toxic chemical on my skin and I accidentally spilled DMSO on it, am I just mainlining that toxin straight into my bloodstream?
That is the most critical question you could ask, and the answer is yes.
Wow, okay.
It is exactly why the safety protocols we're going to discuss later are so obsessively strict, because DMSO does not possess a moral compass.
Right, it's just a chemical.
Exactly. It does not discriminate between a life-saving medication and a lethal poison. If it is mixed with a toxin, a pesticide, or even the chemical dyes in your clothing, it will act as a vector and carry those compounds directly into your cells.
That is terrifying. It's literally a chemical master key, and you have to be incredibly careful what you leave lying around when you use it.
It is terrifying if used carelessly.
Yeah.
But that exact same amplifying effect is what makes it such a powerful medical tool in controlled settings.
Because you can use it on purpose to carry things.
Right. The clinical guides detail how this vectoring ability is actively used to exponentially increase the effectiveness of other therapies.
Okay, what kind of therapies?
They specifically highlight compounds like MMS and DCA, which is dichloroacetic acid, sometimes used in experimental cancer protocols, and various corticosteroids.
So by dissolving these active pharmaceutical ingredients in DMSO, the drug bypasses the digestive tract completely.
Correct.
It avoids liver degradation, reaches its final destination way faster, and develops its full effect directly inside the target cells.
Exactly. The literature notes that DCA, for example, is particularly enhanced by DMSO because the solvent transports the acid directly across the hardened membranes of mutated cells.
Oh.
And crucially, DMSO doesn't just drop off the payload and immediately evaporate. The pharmacokinetics show that it has a remarkably long residence time.
Yeah, I read that. The texts say it stays in the body for about a day and a half, roughly 36 hours.
Yes.
So for 36 hours, it is maintaining this enhanced cellular permeability, keeping the environment open, and keeping the active ingredients circulating right at the core of the inflammation.
For a solvent to remain active in the tissue for that long without causing systemic toxicity is highly unusual, and it allows for sustained, deep tissue therapeutic action that standard topical creams honestly can't even approach.
So if this substance is the ultimate cellular delivery vehicle, what exactly is it delivering and what conditions is it actually being used for?
Well, the clinical guide we are looking at lists dozens of applications.
Right. At a macro level, it defines DMSO as an anti-inflammatory, an analgesic meaning it kills pain, an antioxidant, a muscle relaxant, and a vasodilator.
Let's break those down, starting with the musculoskeletal applications. Because sports injuries are really where DMSO made its early reputation.
We're talking strains, severe sprains, torn muscle fibers, stretched ligaments.
Yeah.
When someone tears a muscle or badly sprains an ankle, standard protocol is usually ice, rest, and maybe ibuprofen. How does painting a wood extract solvent onto the skin change the healing process of a torn muscle?
To understand that, you have to look at what actually causes muscle vulnerability in the first place. The texts focus heavily on tissue acidification.
Tissue acidification.
Yeah. When you exercise intensely, or when a muscle goes into spasm to protect a joint, the tissue burns through its oxygen supply and switches to anaerobic metabolism.
Okay.
And the byproduct of that is lactic acid.
Right, that intense burning sensation you get at the end of a heavy workout.
Exactly. Now, if the circulation is poor, which it always is around an acute injury because of the swelling, that lactic acid is not flushed out properly.
It just sits there.
Yes. The tissue becomes highly acidic, and acidic muscle tissue loses its elasticity. It becomes tight, brittle, and far more prone to micro-tearing.
So the empty, acidified muscle tissue simply isn't resilient enough to withstand physical stress.
Precisely. And according to the clinical protocols, when you apply DMSO over that sprain, it rapidly penetrates down into the muscle belly.
Right?
Because of its polarity, it binds directly to the lactic acid molecules and forcibly flushes them out of the tissue by increasing the local fluid exchange.
It acts like a chemical sponge that specifically targets metabolic fatigue.
Yes. Furthermore, because it is a vector, sports medicine practitioners often dissolve targeted minerals and trace elements like magnesium or localized anti-inflammatories directly into the DMSO.
Oh, smart.
The solvent carries those healing nutrients right past the swelling and delivers them directly to the torn fiber.
It's like taking the construction materials directly to the collapsed bridge instead of just dropping them off at the edge of town.
That's a great way to put it.
But beyond just repairing the tissue, the pain relief aspect is what made it so famous, right? I mean, the authors of these texts make a very bold claim. They state that localized DMSO application provides better pain reduction than aspirin or oral narcotics.
They do claim that. And that claim requires a deep dive into neurology.
Okay.
Pain relief from DMSO is not merely a numbing effect, like you would get from a topical lidocaine cream that just deadens the surface nerves.
Right.
The mechanism is far more systemic and multi-pronged. When you apply DMSO, it actually engages the parasympathetic nervous system.
That's the rest and digest network, right? The system that calms you down after a spike of adrenaline.
Yes. Chronic pain locks the body into a sympathetic state, a constant fight-or-flight loop.
Which is exhausting.
Incredibly. By activating the parasympathetic system, DMSO chemically signals the body to lower the production of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It creates a state of internal physiological peace, which inherently lowers the brain's overall perception of pain. But its most profound effect happens locally, right at the site of the injury, involving the specific nerves transmitting the pain.
You mean the C fibers?
Precisely. Pain from an inflammatory focus is transmitted along unmyelinated C fibers up the spinal cord to the brain. DMSO has a unique electrochemical ability to interrupt the conduction of impulses along these specific nerve tracts.
Oh, it literally blocks the transmission of the pain signal. The brain simply stops receiving the message that the tissue is hurting.
Exactly.
So it calms the global stress response and it cuts the wire on the local alarm system. But there's also a sheer physical, mechanical reason the pain goes down, right? The text talks about a rapid diuretic effect at the application site.
Yes. When you spray DMSO onto the skin over a swollen, painful joint, say a badly sprained knee, the osmotic shift we discussed earlier occurs rapidly.
Okay.
The DMSO pulls excess interstitial fluid, the swelling out of the localized area, and pushes it into the vascular system to be drained.
It physically deflates the swollen tissue.
Exactly. And when that physical swelling goes down, the hydraulic pressure that was crushing the surrounding nerve endings is relieved.
Oh.
So you have a three-tiered approach to pain. calming the brain's stress response, chemically blocking the nerve conduction, and physically deflating the tissue that is crushing the nerve.
That is an incredibly sophisticated pharmacological cascade for a single molecule.
It really is.
And the list of clinical applications just keeps going. They detail its use in skin and wound healing. We're talking severe acne, thermal burns, massive blisters. The text state it accelerates cellular proliferation, allowing the skin to regenerate much faster, while simultaneously deploying an antibacterial effect that starves off the pathogens causing the infection.
It's multitasking on a cellular level.
But then the literature moves away from the skin and muscles and starts talking about internal organ diseases. And this is where the delivery mechanisms get really intense.
The internal applications really demonstrate the sheer versatility of the compound. The guides dedicate significant space to a condition called cystitis.
Specifically interstitial cystitis, right?
Yes, which is a brutally painful chronic inflammation of the bladder wall.
Now, with typical bladder infections, you take an oral antibiotic. How does DMSO treat a chronic inflammation of an internal organ like the bladder?
Well, interstitial cystitis isn't just a simple bacterial infection. It's a breakdown of the protective mucus layer of the bladder, known as the JAG layer.
Okay.
Because that protective shield is gone, the acidic urine constantly burns the exposed bladder tissue, causing severe inflammation and agonizing pain.
That sounds awful.
It is, and standard oral drugs struggle to reach the bladder wall in high enough concentrations to do anything. But DMSO is actually instilled directly into the bladder via a catheter.
Wait, so they pump the liquid straight into the organ?
Yes, and because it's a bipolar solvent, it immediately penetrates the damaged urothelium. It doesn't just sit on the surface, it sinks deep into the bladder wall.
Wow.
Once inside the tissue, it stabilizes the mast cells. Mast cells are the immune cells that release massive amounts of histamine during an inflammatory response.
Okay, so by preventing that histamine release, DMSO stops the inflammatory cascade right at its source.
Exactly. Concurrently, it exerts that local anesthetic effect on the exposed C fibers in the bladder wall, providing rapid pain relief.
So it's acting as an anti-inflammatory, a nerve blocker, and a tissue penetrator, all inside a highly acidic internal organ.
All at the same time.
And the texts mention it is also used for a systemic, incredibly severe condition called amyloidosis.
Yeah, amyloidosis is a devastating disease. It occurs when the body produces mutated, misfolded proteins called amyloids.
And they just build up, right?
Right. These proteins are insoluble, meaning the body can't break them down, so they just accumulate in major organs, the kidneys, the heart, the liver, eventually causing total organ failure.
But how can a solvent possibly treat misfolded proteins? That sounds like a structural issue.
The clinical texts describe using intravenous DMSO, administered strictly by a physician, of course, to tackle this.
IV DMSO.
Yes. The underlying theory, supported by some remarkable early studies, is that because DMSO is such an aggressive, universally penetrating solvent, it can actually interface with these insoluble protein fibrils.
Oh.
It helps to denature or break down the amyloid deposits, mobilizing them so they can finally be dissolved into the bloodstream and excreted by the kidneys in the urine.
That is staggering. It physically acts as a chemical drain cleaner for the organs.
It's a great analogy.
And then on the complete opposite end of the medical spectrum, the text mentions a pure survival application. Water treatment?
Oh, yeah?
It says if you are traveling abroad and the urban tap water is heavily aggressively chlorinated, you can use a few drops of DMSO to neutralize the chlorine in your drinking water.
It acts as a chemical scavenger. The lone electron pairs on the sulfur atom readily react with the free chlorine, neutralizing it into harmless chloride compounds.
It's just a testament to how aggressively reactive the molecule is.
Absolutely.
Okay, I have to step in here and play the skeptic, though.
Fair enough.
I am looking at this list of applications from the source texts. It includes sports sprains, severe burns, chronic bladder inflammation, deadly organ protein mutations, neutralizing chlorine, and then it goes on to list ADHD, leprosy, cancer, insomnia, varicose veins, and slipped discs.
It's a long list.
When any source claims that one single cheap substance can cure literally everything from a stub toe to leprosy, my snake oil alarm goes off. It just sounds too good to be true. How did the authors possibly justify this massive, entirely disconnected list of diseases?
It's a vital critique, and anyone reading this literature must apply rigorous critical thinking. The authors are actually aware of how this looks, which is why the text explicitly states DMSO is not considered a panacea.
So they admit it's not a cure-all.
Right. They are not claiming it is a magic independent cure for leprosy or slipped discs.
Then why are these diseases heavily featured in the clinical guide?
Because you have to look past the name of the disease and look at the cellular pathology. What is the fundamental mechanism of DMSO? It reduces massive inflammation, it halts oxidative stress by flushing out free radicals, and it dramatically increases microcirculation to deliver oxygen and nutrients at a deep cellular level.
Right, we established that.
If you look at that massive, varied list of diseases, from the tissue degradation of leprosy to the neurological hyperactivity of ADHD to the structural deterioration of a slipped disc, almost all of them share a common denominator.
Which is?
Severe cellular inflammation, localized hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen, and toxic metabolic buildup.
Oh, I see. It's not targeting the specific bacteria of leprosy or the specific neurotransmitters of ADHD. It is targeting the inflamed environment in which those diseases thrive.
Precisely. It is a foundational cellular therapy, not a targeted pharmaceutical bullet.
That makes a lot of sense.
If a symptom is caused by chronic inflammation crushing a nerve, or oxidative stress destroying a tissue bed, DMSO radically alters that local environment. It clears the smoke, delivers the oxygen, and creates a stabilized cellular environment where the body's own innate immune and regenerative mechanisms can finally engage.
So it doesn't cure the disease, it optimizes the battlefield so the body can fight it.
Exactly.
That completely reframes the narrative. It's a cellular environment optimizer.
It is.
But, as we discussed earlier with the VIP rideshare analogy, if this compound is powerful enough to dissolve amyloid proteins and blast through lipid bilayers, the margin for error must be razor thin.
Extremely thin.
The clinical guides are intensely, almost terrifyingly clear on this. With great cellular permeability comes massive risk. If you handle this incorrectly, you can do severe damage.
Yes.
Which brings us to the golden rules of DMSO application.
These are not gentle suggestions or best practices. These are absolute, non-negotiable chemical laws for handling the solvent.
And the first, most heavily emphasized rule in every single text is the danger of plastics.
Yes.
The literature practically screams this at the reader in all caps. Never use plastic.
Never.
You cannot store it in plastic bottles. You cannot measure it with plastic cups. You cannot use a plastic funnel to pour it. You can't even let the mist from a spray bottle accidentally settle on a plastic countertop.
And when you recall what DMSO chemically is, a highly aggressive, bipolar, aprotic solvent, the reason becomes terrifyingly obvious.
Right.
Modern plastics are not just simple, stable materials. They are complex polymers loaded with chemical additives. Plasticizers to make them flexible, phthalates, bisphenol A or BPA UV stabilizers, and colorants.
And many of these are known endocrine disruptors and severe toxins.
Exactly. And because DMSO dissolves almost anything.
The moment pure DMSO touches a plastic surface, it instantly begins to break down the polymer chains and dissolve those toxic chemical additives into itself.
The liquid becomes contaminated almost immediately.
And because it is the ultimate vector, the moment you put that contaminated liquid onto your skin, the DMSO will carry those dissolved plasticizers, phthalates, and BPAs straight through your skin, past your cellular defenses, and directly into your systemic bloodstream.
You are effectively using a hypodermic needle to inject dissolved plastic toxins into your body. The cellular damage that can cause is immense.
That is exactly why the safety protocols dictate that pure 99.9% DMSO must only ever be purchased and stored in dark amber glass bottles.
Yes, the amber glass protects the molecule from ultraviolet light degradation, and the glass itself is completely impervious to the solvent.
If you need to measure it, you use a glass pipette. If you need to mix it, you use a glass beaker or a ceramic bowl.
Exactly.
If you are straining a mixture, you must use an unbleached natural cotton cloth or a pure paper coffee filter. Synthetic fabrics will melt right into the liquid. It must be a rigorously glass-only environment.
The second paramount rule is mandatory dilution.
Right. You mentioned pure 99.9% DMSO. The texts are clear that under normal environmental conditions, applying undiluted DMSO directly to the skin acts as a cytotoxic.
Yes.
Cyto meaning cell, toxic meaning poison. It actually poisons the cells if it's too strong.
Yes. In its absolute pure form, the osmotic pull and the chemical reactivity are just too aggressive.
Okay.
It will dehydrate and destroy the cell membrane it touches, causing severe blistering and chemical burns.
Ouch.
It is only when it is diluted to specific concentrations that the molecule relaxes enough to exhibit those miraculous transport and healing properties without causing structural damage.
So accurate dilution is a requirement, not an option.
Absolutely. Therefore, the dilution process itself is strict. You can't just run the tap and mix it with sink water.
Oh, absolutely not. Tap water is loaded with chlorine, fluoride, heavy metals from pipes, and trace pharmaceuticals.
Right.
If you mix DMSO with tap water, you are instantly vectoring all of those municipal water contaminants into your bloodstream.
Exactly. The text specifies that it must only be diluted with pure, medical-grade distilled water, completely salt-free reverse osmosis water, or a specific pure magnesium chloride solution.
Let's break down the specific dilution ratios the clinical guide mandates, because it varies drastically depending on the anatomy you are treating.
It really does.
The skin on the bottom of your foot is vastly different from the skin under your eye.
Exactly. The thickness and sensitivity of the stratum corneum dictate the strength. For thick, calloused areas like the soles of the feet, or for treating deep viral warts, the text recommends a robust 70% DMSO to 30% distilled water solution.
Okay, 70-30 for feet.
Moving up to the larger joints in the torso, the knees, shoulders, back, and chest, the tissue is more sensitive, so you step the concentration down to a 50-50 mixture.
50% DMSO.
Right. And for highly sensitive, thin-skinned areas like the face, the neck, or the scalp, the guide warns never to exceed a 25% concentration.
And in the extreme cases, such as specialized ophthalmological use, where it is prepared as eye drops for cataracts or glaucoma, it must be formulated at a microscopic 1% to 2% solution. Anything higher would severely damage the cornea?
The actual physical application process is just as regimented as the chemistry.
Yeah, you don't just splash it on like aftershave.
No. Step 1 is surgical cleanliness. You must wash your hands and the target area of skin obsessively with a pure, natural soap and water.
And you must ensure there is absolutely no chemical residue left behind.
None.
No moisturizing lotion, no chemical sunscreens, no perfume, no trace of body wash film. Because if you spray DMSO over a layer of chemical sunscreen, it will instantly drive the titanium dioxide and synthetic UV filters straight into your organs.
Precisely. Once the skin is pristine and totally dry, you use a glass pipette or a glass spray bottle to apply the solution.
And the text highlights a very specific instruction here. Do not rub it in.
Right. Rubbing it in is unnecessary and counterproductive.
Why is that?
Because the solvent absorbs so rapidly and efficiently on its own, forcefully rubbing it only increases the risk of introducing microscopic dirt or oils from your fingertips into the localized area.
Oh, that makes sense.
You simply spray it on and let it sit.
You let it sit for roughly 30 minutes. Once the time is up, you take a damp, pure cotton cloth and wipe away any remaining moisture on the surface to ensure no environmental dust settles into it later.
Exactly.
Now, what exactly is happening during those 30 minutes, and what are the warning signs?
The clinical texts make a clear distinction between expected physiological reactions and dangerous side effects.
Okay.
Because DMSO is a potent vasodilator, meaning it violently forces the local blood vessels to widen and rush blood to the area. It is completely normal to experience localized redness, a warm tingling sensation, or intense itching at the application site.
It can look and feel like a mild sunburn for about an hour.
Yeah, that's just the blood rushing in and the cellular channels opening.
But the guide also outlines strict red flags. It warns that if a user experiences severe vertigo, extreme nausea, sudden shortness of breath, or sharp digestive pain, that is not a normal histamine reaction.
In those instances, application must cease immediately and the area should be flushed with water.
Stop everything.
Yes. While individual body chemistry varies, and some people might experience a mild transient headache due to the rapid detoxification and release of cellular waste into the bloodstream,
Right.
severe dizziness or systemic nausea indicates a severe intolerance or a toxic vectoring event, and medical consultation is required.
Okay, we have covered the science, the history, and the safety. But we have to talk about the sensory phenomenon that defines this compound,
Oh boy.
the smell.
We started this entire deep dive with Dr. Jacob spilling a few drops on his hand and instantly tasting oysters and garlic. Why does rubbing a completely clear, odorless liquid on my sprained ankle make my breath smell like a sulfur pit?
It is one of the most fascinating metabolic quirks in human biology.
How does it work? When DMSO enters your body, it circulates and does its cellular work largely intact. However, as it passes through the liver, a tiny fraction of it undergoes a metabolic reduction.
Okay.
The clinical texts estimate that roughly 1% of the absorbed DMSO loses its oxygen atom during liver processing.
And when it loses that oxygen...
It transforms into a different compound entirely,
Yes.
dimethyl sulfide or DMS.
Wait, DMS, that's the exact compound we talked about at the very beginning.
Yes.
The gas produced by the microscopic ocean plankton.
Exactly. Your liver is essentially mimicking the metabolic cycle of marine phytoplankton.
That is insane.
And dimethyl sulfide is highly volatile. It has a very low boiling point, which means at normal human body temperature, it aggressively turns into a gas.
Yeah.
Your body has to get rid of this gas quickly.
And it does that through the respiratory system and the integumentary system.
Right. It forces the gas into your lungs, meaning you exhale it with every breath.
Yeah.
And it pushes it out through your sweat glands, meaning it constantly evaporates off your skin.
And the distinct olfactory profile of dimethyl sulfide is universally described as raw garlic, old oysters, or a slightly putrid, sweet sulfur smell.
Yep. So you are literally exhaling volcanic ocean gas.
And the texts note that depending on your metabolic rate and the dosage, this phenomenon can last for up to 72 hours.
3 whole days.
You could put it on a sore knee on Friday night, and by Sunday morning, your entire bedroom smells like a seafood market. Is there any way to mitigate this, or do you just have to isolate yourself from polite society when you use it?
The guides acknowledge that a significant percentage of patients abandon the therapy entirely because they find the odor formation socially intolerable.
I can see why.
They do offer a minor biochemical workaround. They suggest that for internal or oral use, adding a significant amount of fresh lemon juice or a complex, strong-tasting tea to the dilution can alter the metabolic breakdown slightly.
How does that help?
The citric acid and complex polyphenols can help bind some of the sulfur compounds, somewhat muting the severity of the bodily evaporation. But chemically speaking, it is largely an unavoidable byproduct of utilizing the solvent.
Good to know. Now, before we zoom out to the big picture, we absolutely must cover the strict medical contraindications.
Yes, very important.
The guide is very clear that there are certain demographics who should never, under any circumstances, come into contact with this substance.
The risk groups are defined by the compound's amplifying effects.
Right.
First and foremost, pregnant women and nursing mothers must abstain entirely.
Because DMSO acts as a universal vector, it crosses the placental barrier and enters breast milk instantly.
Exactly. Introducing such an aggressive cellular solvent and whatever toxins it might be carrying to a developing fetus or infant is an unacceptable risk.
The texts also issue a severe warning for patients who are on sedatives, tranquilizers, or anticoagulant medications, blood thinners.
This comes back to the synergistic amplifying effect. If you are taking an oral blood thinner, your doctor has prescribed a very specific dosage to keep your blood at a safe viscosity.
Okay.
If you introduce DMSO into your system, it can drastically amplify the absorption and efficacy of that blood thinner. A safe dose suddenly becomes a massive overdose, leading to dangerous internal hemorrhaging.
Oh, wow.
Similarly, amplifying a sedative could depress the central nervous system to the point of respiratory failure.
It also explicitly mentions severe uncontrolled diabetics. And it notes that people with specific severe autoimmune skin conditions, like active neurodermatitis or advanced psoriasis, should avoid topical application.
In those skin conditions, the stratum corneum, the protective barrier of the skin, is already fundamentally compromised and highly reactive.
Right.
Applying an aggressive bipolar solvent to already highly inflamed broken skin can trigger an overwhelming local immune response and massive tissue irritation. It requires profound respect for the individual's existing medical baseline.
This has been a genuinely staggering journey. We started with ocean plankton naturally producing sulfur compounds, which led us into the massive chemical vats of paper mills where we accidentally discovered how to mass produce this stuff from wood lignin.
It's an incredible origin.
We explored the bizarre physics of a liquid that freezes at 64 degrees and can explode at 188 degrees. We dug into the history of an unpatentable nature extract that triggered an explosion of medical research, only to be allegedly suppressed by a pharmaceutical industry terrified of losing profits.
And we decoded the profound biological mechanism of action. The realization that dimethyl sulfoxide is a bipolar aprotic solvent, a tractor substance that doesn't just pass through the lipid bilayers of our cells, but temporarily alters their architecture.
It forces life-saving oxygen and medications deep into inflamed tissue, while simultaneously reversing the osmotic flow to violently flush out lactic acid, free radicals, and toxic metabolic waste.
We looked at its clinical application across a wide spectrum of diseases, from flushing lactic acid out of a torn hamstring, to physically dissolving mutated amyloid proteins in failing organs, to acting as a targeted nerve blocker for chronic pain.
And we outlined the terrifyingly strict golden rules: no plastic ever, mandatory, mathematically precise dilution with pure water, obsessive skin hygiene prior to application, and the inevitable bizarre reality of sweating out garlic and ocean gas for 3 days.
Yeah, looking at all of this, the history, the biochemistry, the risks, and the profound clinical mechanics, what is the major takeaway for you? Why does a marginalized 60-year-old medical mystery matter today?
I think the relevance is deeply philosophical, but also incredibly practical.
How so?
Whether you are an athlete dealing with a chronic, career-threatening tendon injury, someone battling intractable pain that modern medicine has failed to solve, or just a curious mind fascinated by the extreme frontiers of natural chemistry, DMSO forces you to completely shatter your preconceived notions about your own anatomy.
I agree.
We are raised to think of our skin as a fortress wall, an impenetrable barrier. But the science of DMSO proves that under the right chemical conditions, your skin is not a wall at all. It is a highly porous, wide-open door.
That is the perfect conceptual framing. It proved that the barrier between the environment and your internal organs is an illusion, dictated entirely by molecular polarity.
Yeah.
And building on that idea of the open door, I want to leave you listening with a final provocative thought. It's a concept briefly touched upon in the historical texts, but its implications are staggering. The authors refer to a concept called the free garden pharmacy.
The free garden pharmacy. How does a potent industrial solvent tie into a garden?
Well, the clinical guides suggest using DMSO not just as a delivery vehicle for synthetic pharmaceuticals, but as an extraction solvent for the natural world.
What do you mean?
Think about everyday medicinal plants and garden herbs.
Yeah.
Rosemary, turmeric, willow bark, aloe. These plants contain incredibly complex, highly potent active healing compounds.
Right, natural medicine.
But the problem has always been that when we ingest them orally, the human digestive tract destroys the vast majority of these fragile molecules before they ever reach our cells.
But if you soak those plants in DMSO,
The DMSO acts as an absolute chemical extractor. It pulls those pure, fragile, complex botanical compounds out of the plant matter and binds them into the solvent.
oh, wow.
Now, imagine the implications of what we've discussed today. You have just created the ultimate biological delivery vehicle carrying pure, uncorrupted botanical medicine.
You bypass the stomach acid entirely.
Exactly. You apply that botanical DMSO tincture to the skin, and the VIP rideshare drives those complex plant compounds straight through the lipid bilayer and directly into the core of the human cell.
That is amazing.
What undiscovered, highly potent medicines are sitting in your backyard right now? What miraculous anti-inflammatory plant compounds are just waiting for the right chemical transport system to unlock their full potential inside the human body?
It completely revolutionizes the concept of herbal medicine. It changes how you view every leaf and root in the natural world around you.
It really does.
It makes you realize that the cure to so many ailments might already exist in nature. We just haven't had the right biochemical key to unlock the cellular door.
Absolutely.
It brings the entire story full circle right back to Dr. Jacob in that 60s laboratory. You spill a drop of water on your hand, you dry it off, and you move on with your life. You spill a drop of DMSO, and 3 minutes later, you're tasting the ocean.